Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm just doing a quick video because my mind just pondered a question that had been coming into the fore lately because of all this, what's going on politically. And I was just watching a secular talk video about Josh Hawley and his CPAC speech, and I was just thinking, would it be weird if in 2024 there's some type of populist Republican that actually is way more consistent than Donald Trump is, running against some type of neoliberal establishment, corporatist, warmonger, left, liberal in the Democratic Party? And which one would I vote for? And honestly, I would be conflicted at that point if I would, whether or not, maybe a third party person would be in there, of course, in that situation. However, if given the choice between those two, if this so-called populist Republican was consistent with their thing, with everything, let's say they're not as racist as Trump was. They don't use the type of, demagoguery and stuff that Trump did as far as immigrants and stuff. Maybe they're really restrictive as far as their immigration policy. Maybe it's comparable to some places in Europe where they actually made some stuff made Trump look like a fucking, open the borders guy in comparison at some points, which people don't really talk about. But would I vote for this populist Republican? And the answer is quite possibly, really depending on the situation. Now, I proclaimed that if Rand Paul would have ran against Hillary in 2016, there was a possibility I would have voted for him, because at the time he did frame himself way more as a libertarian than he was becoming more establishment Republican, but at the time he was still had those libertarian bona fides. But the fact of the matter is that if you have this slow, weird, bizarre party switch happening, and it crystallizes in the next few years even more, there's going to be a weird exodus of a bunch of people from the Democratic Party into the Republican Party. And I know they're both oligarchies and, they're both piles of shit. But the question is there because, I voted for Gary Johnson in 2012. So, I mean, I've been known to kind of bounce off of the, liberal leftist leanings that I grew up with, at least as far as the libertarian thing goes. So I have to ponder that, because the way things are going with the Democrats is pretty scary with, the corporate power and everything else. Now they have this woke veneer, this, what did Webster Tarpley used to say? This left cover, as Webster Tarpley used to call Obama's crimes. This left veneer, this left charade that they use to, do the biddings of the corporations and the banking elites and so forth. But let's say there was someone like Josh Hawley and he went more populist but less reactionary, took out some of those culture war things from his, from his ideas. Maybe he gave a couple, nods to that once in a while. Maybe, a little bit once in a while. And because, there's things that Democrats do that I can't tolerate either, even as a leftist all my life. There was this certain, it's like voting for Al Gore versus fucking George W. Bush. It's like, well, I voted for Ralph Nader, but, if I would have voted for Al Gore, I would have had to hold my nose about Joe Lieberman and his, crusades against video games and rap music and all that shit. So there's always something odious about these candidates. So how much can I tolerate from the Republicans if there's this hypothetical situation did take place? Well, I would say that, it'd be specific policies and specific ideas that they would have, that the Republicans would have versus the Democrats, that would maybe push me towards voting for someone like, if someone like Josh Hawley pushed a little further into the populist camp and even put more quote unquote progressive ideas in there, just sprinkled them in like Parmesan cheese on ravioli or whatever, So that's the $1 million question. other than, whether or not I'm going to get the action vaccination. I mean, I guess, and I'm not going to do a separate video about that, but, if I was forced to in certain situations, I probably would, because I'm not going to live homeless on the streets. And, and by the time that I would be forced to do that, I would know a lot more data about some of the long-term effects and some of the results. I want to see if people have miscarriages, or if people are having children or can get pregnant after taking the vaccine. And it sounds like a total conspiracy theory, but it's after what I've seen, I wouldn't put it past them to put some type of thing in there to I don't know. I don't really believe that. It's all about money mainly, but I want to see what some of the long-term effects are, even from a couple months. So as far as whether or not I'm going to get the shot, if I'm forced to, then maybe. Or, maybe I could wait a couple of years before, I get a live band and have to tour Europe and have to get the shot. Then I'll know even more about whether or not, the long-term effects are there. But that's my answer to that question. I don't know at this point. Leaning towards no, but as I was having an argument with my friend last night about this. No, it's become about the action vaccination. But, $1 million question is, I don't know. I really don't know whether or not. As far as back to the previous subject of this video, which is about, is whether or not I would vote for a Republican ever in my life. I did vote for Gary Johnson, who used to be a Republican, don't forget. So I have voted for Republicans in the past. I think I voted for a libertarian sheriff in Dane County once. I thought that was pretty cool, But I'm done with the Democrats, overall, unless someone like, there was a Bernie Sanders with balls. And see, a lot of the things about Bernie Sanders is that, if he had, it's just like, it'll always be a compromise, but what kind of compromise are we willing to make? So, but yeah, I would vote for someone like, it doesn't matter if there's an R to their name or not, or a D to their name. To me, those are just artificial, superficial, ridiculous things that don't matter in the long run. So yeah, I would probably vote for someone that, if they were more populist. I mean, I know the Republicans are going more in that direction because of Trump. There's some bad things associated with that. They took away more of those bad things and replaced them with good things, better things. I probably would vote for someone like that. If they, I do think there were bad things about Trump, and there were some good things. Just like anybody, just like Biden. I think there's bad things about Biden. I mean, I think they're all pieces of shit overall, because I think the state lends itself to corruption. But, as far as, if there's probably some things I'd see Biden, probably some of these executive orders I'd take a look at and like, oh, that's good, and the tone of the country is, more still divided, but, maybe, having the left fall asleep a little bit in a certain way. I mean, like as far as like these lockdowns and stuff, for example, like you take the, out of the equation, these ideas that the lockdowns, are some kind of political thing, like the left versus right. And now that the Democratic mayors and governors are actually rescinding a lot of their guidelines. In fact, I heard Cuomo's even doing more than I thought he was. I'm going to have to check into that. And then there's the vax passport ideas that he's trying to push to in certain places, which I don't know if it's going to stand the muster of the people or not. I mean, we still have a lot of people that are very hesitant to take this thing, and for very good reason. The United States is full of fucking history of MK Ultra, Tuskegee experiment, I mean, 9/11, I mean, WMD, I mean, JFK, whatever you believe about that, Watergate, Vietnam War, just, all these things, how are we going to trust the experts, the technocrats, that push us into war? Why are we going to trust people just because they have a fucking medical degree versus economics or political degree or whatever, in the case of like, some of these people? I don't know. So, yeah, the question is whether or not I would vote for a Republican in the next election if they were less odious than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever is the candidate or is the nominee for Democrats. And the answer is, I may not vote again, and I may not vote for anybody but third parties. But if I were seeing the choice between civilization and complete corporate technocratic control. See, this is a different choice. Oh, well, Trump's the next Hitler. We gotta. It doesn't matter. Biden sucks, but I think Trump's the next Orange Hitler. Yeah, it's like, well, it's kind of one of those dichotomies, isn't it? It's like whether or not we have complete corporate control and oligarchy versus a slightly odious Republican who says some, race baiting things, but has these populist ideas and does not want to, put our country under these corporations. Maybe, like Josh Hawley, I mean, he had, maybe he pushed, I mean, he did co-author some things with Bernie Sanders, and, some of these like anti-monopolistic ideas, if they take place, if they take root in the Republican Party, I may not have a choice. If, if the Republicans are calling for the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, I mean, that was one thing that was in the platform in 2016. It kind of went over their heads, but they actually called. I believe the platform did call for the reinstatement of that, which is unprecedented. I mean, 20 years before they were wanting to repeal Glass-Steagall, and there are problems with Glass-Steagall, as like libertarians have pointed out, but as versus what we have now, it's completely it would be completely necessary. And I'm beginning to even think about the fairness doctrine again, as far as, let's say there was a fairness doctrine put into place and there's a sunset provision in it. Maybe it would go a long way to creating a better country as far as having these points of view represented in media. I'm not necessarily for the fairness doctrine in theory, but as a pragmatic measure, I could see its benefits. So, but yeah, million dollar question. One of the $1 million questions in my life is whether or not I would vote for a Republican if they were way less odious than the Democrats are becoming. And the answer is probably yes.